Hello there guys. In this video I was going to build this Bandai Star Wars speeder bike largely off camera and then focus the video on building a jungle forest diorama for it. As a result I don't have a lot of footage of building this kit. I will say however that these Bandai kits are absolutely fantastic. They really are snap together kits, but don't let that put you off. The detail on them is something else. And in fact you can actually recognise some of the original model kit parts that were used by the model builders in the 1980s to create the models for the films. So that was the plan. However, when I got to the diorama building stage, I couldn't really get things working right. I started with this frame here, and I knew that I wanted to include some of those really large trees that you see in the forest moon of Endor in the films. So I had this frame and I sort of put the speeder bike in it, and I thought, well, either he's going to have to be going past a huge tree, or maybe he could be going under or over a huge fallen tree. But I thought if I did that, the balance of the base just didn't quite look right. I did sort of build up the sides of the diorama like this and imagine sort of a steep muddy slope, and then from the top of that slope maybe a tree being horizontal and the speeder bike going under it. But I just couldn't get something that looked quite the way I wanted it to be, and I felt like if I made the diorama any bigger it would hide the speeder bike and it would overpower the speeder bike. So instead I decided to go the opposite direction, and to really capture the speed of that bike I went for a very, very small base. This in fact is a slice of the trunk from my Christmas tree from Christmas 2023. It was a little bit too wide to fit in the holder that I had. I should have measured it before I bought it from the shop. So I took a couple of slices off the bottom, and being a true modeller I kept it to the side. I was curious, to be honest, whether or not the wood would crack when it dried, but I knew it would come in handy one day, and today's that day. I just felt that if I included the speeder bike with a base like this, because the bike is so much bigger than the base, it really just kind of lent an impression of speed to it, if you see what I mean. So I drew around that slice of wood and added a XPS foam topping. The main reason for that is I'm going to be using acrylic pastes. They're quite high in moisture content and I don't want that to seep through to the wood. I sort of beveled off that edge with a knife, and then because I had a tiny drop left in the bottom of a tube, I used some No More Nails glue to stick those two together. Of course the speeder bike needs to be flying, so I drilled a nice hole in the wood, and I probably should have done it before I built the model, but I also managed to drill a hole in the bottom of the speeder bike without destroying the model or drilling through to my hand, which is always a bonus. First up was some thick acrylic mud from Vallejo. As you can see, this is quite thick, and I took a bag of this sort of scatter leaf product and mixed it in with the mud to try and give it some texture. I'm not quite sure how well that worked. I feel like it's a bit chunkier here than it normally is, so perhaps it did work. While that was still wet, I put various bits of sort of twig and moss and things like that into the mud. And although the speeder bike is 1/12 scale and these leaves are supposed to be 1/35 scale, I gave a good scattering of those all over the base. I also had this piece of wood which I picked up on a walk in the forest recently, so I painted it with XF10 brown and stuck it to the base using some more of that acrylic paste. I used small amounts of PVA glue to attach some scenic scatter to the top of that wood to simulate moss and general growth on it. And since I quite liked the look of that, I also added some of the moss to the forest floor. Now I've had this collection of laser cut leaves from Ammo by Mig for quite a while, and in fact, as you can see here, I've already painted them a long time ago in a variety of green shades. These come with a small wire to act as the stems, and so I attached a few of them using super glue to the diorama base. Again, these are 1/35th scale, so they're a bit too small for this speeder bike, but I think the base being slightly smaller than the bike doesn't look too bad. I'm trying to add a variety of plants without making every single one completely different. And of course, because the fern leaves are all the same size, some of them I had to trim down to get some variety. And the leaves that I trimmed off, I put on the ground as dead foliage. Recently I bought this mega tub of tufts from Warpainter Scenics. I can't remember how much it cost, but it was quite a good price. And it just has a random collection of tufts in it. Every tub is different, I believe. Again, they're better suited to smaller scales, but what I did do is take one of the tufts, tear it apart, and use the bits like this as sort of seedlings growing on the forest floor. A lot of these scenic materials look better when they're painted, so I took some acrylic paint in various shades of green and grey-green, diluted it quite a lot with water, and broke up that single colour of the moss. I also added some very small amounts of yellow. Although they're painted already, the leaves will also look a bit better if I give them a small light wash. So this is some very diluted acrylic paint. And this works particularly well on those fern leaves there because they are quite uniform in the colour that I painted them. I tried to give a dark wash of black acrylic paint to the fallen log, but that didn't work really well because the wood is quite absorbent. So instead I went to dry brush a variety of green, mossy colours over the raised detail of that log. And really at that point the base was complete. I did want to dirty up the figure a little bit because it looked a little bit out of place in its clean white armour. So I took some brown pigment and just brushed it directly onto the model. The models had a coat of VMS flat varnish to take that toy-like shine out of the plastic, and that's enough to increase the surface area and to make the pigment bite. I applied the pigment quite heavily on the boots and the legs, but I did actually apply it over the entire model, including the head and the chest. But I applied it so lightly up there that it almost was a sort of a dry brushed highlight. It also worked quite well on the black to give the same effect. Then with a bit of struggle I was able to pose the figure in the right place, mount the bike on the rod, and my model was complete. So there we go guys, that was my build, or sort of build, of the Bandai Star Wars speeder bike and a small jungle diorama base. As I say, this is only a short video because originally I'd intended to do a much bigger diorama, but do let me know if you'd like to see some more detailed builds of these Bandai kits. I do have a good number of them in the stash. My brain works in a strange way in relation to these because they're quite rare kits in the UK, and I know that I can't really get them again, so for some reason my brain tells me it's a good idea to keep them in the stash. But of course model kits are designed to be built, and so I should just get on and build them and enjoy the process. So yes, the images that you can see there are some of the kits that I've got, and I think for the figures in particular I will sort of do a small base, this kind of size I think, just capturing some kind of like desert scenery or forest scenery or whatever it might be for each one. So if you'd like to see any of those built, then leave a comment below and I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for watching this very quick video, and a special thanks to my Patreon supporters and my YouTube members. As those supporters will know, I've been making some big progress recently on a lot of my projects, including the Prince of Wales. And I'm hoping to have that finished fairly soon, so keep an eye open for that one. Until then, thank you once again for watching, and until next time, have fun modelling.